In this video, I'd like to give you a few tips and tricks on how to track down what might be going wrong when you run into a problem drawing a cabinet. You may have experienced times when you try to draw a new cabinet or even redraw a cabinet that already exists, and it only partially draws and you get an error message. And it can be sometimes hard to track down what the root cause of that problem is. So hopefully after this video, you'll understand better how to use some of the clues that are here in CabWriter to help you track down the problem. There's the biggest category of it is where the parameters are bad or wrong or conflicting with each other, and you need to figure out which one of those parameters it is. And most of the time it manifests itself in when you try to draw the cabinet, it's only partially drawn, and you need to then figure out where to go from there. So before we dive into how to track down a bad parameter, I want to show something, a phenomena that can affect you on Macs only. This does not happen on PCs. So if you're a PC owner watching this and want to skip ahead to the next section, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, what you might run into on the Mac is a problem redrawing a cabinet that actually has to do with the fact that you have multiple models open. So in our user guide and in other places, we mention that Mac users should only have one model open at any one time. And you can see I've got two different models open here. And what can happen, and this is a problem internal to SketchUp that we have no control over, is that information from one model can bleed into the other one. And once it gets sort of intermingled like that, there's no good way to sort it back out, and it will cause all manner of problems. And while I try not to run with multiple models open, it happens once in a while, either inadvertently or on purpose. And all of a sudden wacky things start happening. So I've got that situation right here at the moment with this model. And I can usually tell I've got the problem because I'll come open up a model and just try to redraw a cabinet that I've already drawn before. So let me do CabWriter redraw selected cabinet here and use the stored defaults, yes. And it says it was unable to complete the cabinet construction. Typical cause is bad or missing parameter default. Now in the second part of this video, we're going to show you how to use that information and go track down the bad parameter. But I'm awfully suspicious here because this is a cabinet that was drawn successfully before, and I tried to use its stored parameters and it still couldn't draw it. So that usually means, I just undid there, that almost always means that I've got a contaminated model because I had multiple ones open. So the first thing to try before you go on to the next part of the video and use some of those techniques, because you could chase your tail for quite a long time, is to quit out of SketchUp and restart it with just this model open. So the easiest way to do that is go close your other models, everything else but the one you want. Not going to save that because it might be contaminated. And I'm going to quit SketchUp with just this one model open, because SketchUp remembers what was open and will reopen with those same models open. Don't save because I don't want to save anything contaminated. And now reopen SketchUp. And let's try redrawing this cabinet again. So redraw selected cabinets. We'll use the stored defaults. Redraw completed. Everything was good. So I could have chased my tail for quite a long time trying to look for a bad parameter there when there really wasn't one. So again, if you're on the Mac, you've got a model that you know worked, and you can't even redraw the cabinets using their own parameters, just stop right there, close all your other models except for the one that you're interested in, quit SketchUp completely, and get back into it. Let's talk about how to track down problems with parameters that might be causing failures when attempting to draw a cabinet. So to do that, we're going to use this simple cabinet here, and we're going to induce some errors and then try to track them down. So first thing I'm going to do is pull up the parameters for this cabinet to make sure I got the right ones. So I'm just going to use the retrieve cabinet defaults and pull those up. And to start, we're going to go to the carcass tab and choose Inset Joinery. Make the pocket width 0 inches, which should cause a failure. So if I drew a new cabinet, I'd have a problem. And if I redraw this cabinet, CabWriter, redraw selected cabinets, do not use the stored defaults because I made that change. And the first thing we see is an error that says CabWriter is unable to complete the cabinet construction. The typical cause is a bad or missing parameter default. The question is, which parameter or default is causing the problem? It doesn't tell us, so we have to do a little sleuthing to figure that out. So the first thing we'll notice is that the cabinet is partially drawn. And the order in which CabWriter draws cabinets is the ends first, face frame, then the carcass, then the doors, and then the drawers. So we can see that the end panel was drawn fine, the face frame was drawn fine, but something went wrong when we started to draw the carcass. The next thing you'll notice is that this side of the carcass is over here at the origin, and by the origin I mean where the red, blue, and green axes come together. So CabWriter actually draws the part over at the origin on layer 0 and then moves it to its proper place, or its proper home in space, which would be over here. So this gives us a big clue. This tells us that something went wrong when trying to draw a cabinet side. So we can eliminate anything to do with the panel and the face frame, or even doors and drawers, because we haven't even got to those yet. So our focus should be on the carcass, but we know what changed here. But if we didn't, there could be a number of parameters on different tabs that affect the drawing of the carcass. So we're not completely home stretch yet. So the first thing you want to do is undo what we did so that we're back to where we were. And then you're going to go up to Window and open up something called the Ruby console. So what this is a debug console that might give us some clues. When the error occurs, things get dumped to this console that we can take a look at. So I'm going to go back, keep the window open, and I'm going to redraw this cabinet again and cause the error to happen again. So I don't want to use the stored defaults. And when I click OK, you'll see that a bunch of stuff shows up in this window. It can be a little hard to read when your window is this small because things are going onto 2 lines. So just to make it a little more clear about what's going on, I'm going to make this window much wider so everything's on 1 line. So what you're seeing here is what functions are being called in the code, which are somewhat descriptive of what's going on. It starts at the bottom. We can see we redraw selected cabinets was done. We get up here, we're constructing a cabinet and so on, but it gets more interesting as we get towards the end here. So it's saying draw sides, create a base side, and create stretcher pockets. And that's the last sort of recognizable thing it was trying to do, is create stretcher pockets. Then it was trying to make a solid and create a component and so on. So that's a pretty good clue right there, creating stretcher pockets. So remember, we didn't know what was causing this error, but now we know it's in the cabinet side, and it was trying to create pockets for the stretchers. we know we were using Inset Joinery. So if I go here, that would tell me to go to the Carcass tab and start looking around. And sure enough, we had a pocket width of 0. So I would fix that parameter, and then we would be good to go. So if I redraw this, well, I want to undo it. And it's going to take me a little longer now because I'm undoing my parameter changes and stuff. So I want to go back and double check, did I really fix that? No. So I should have undid before I went and did all that. So let's try something else. So I'm going to, I used this down here, which is retrieve or reload factory settings. I'm going to reload the factory settings, and I'm going to redraw this cabinet because I'm using factory settings for this particular cabinet. So I can always get back to a known spot. So I'm going to redraw it. Don't use the stored defaults. Now we should be back to a baseline cabinet. So let's try changing something else. Let's go to the Panels tab and set the frame thickness to 0. And again, we'll redraw this cabinet. Use the stored defaults. No. So same problem. So notice we didn't even get a side panel here. And we know that's the first thing that gets drawn. So that gives us a pretty good clue. You can see down here it was trying to draw something. That narrow line was the frame that it was trying to draw, which is the 0 thickness. We know that, but we wouldn't know this if it was a real unknown problem, obviously. But so this little thing down here isn't telling us a heck of a lot. But what it is telling us is that the side panel never drew. So let's undo that again, and let's open our Ruby console. And there's still garbage in there from the last time. So if you have garbage in there, type CLS, and that'll clear the console. And let's redraw the cabinet. No. And here we go again. So we start working our way up, construct styles, draw end frame and panel, construct left end panel, draw front style, and then we taper off. So what this is telling us is there's something going on in the frame and panel. So if we open up, wait, before we do any of that, let's undo. And let's open up, and we go to our Panels tab, which is the most likely culprit, and we start looking around. And we find out our frame thickness is 0 instead of 13/16. So now if I redraw this, everything is cool. So that is the general strategy that you want to use, is you need to know that stuff is drawn at the origin. And the order again is ends first, face frame, then carcass, then doors, then drawers. And we could try that with a drawer panel, and we'll give it a panel thickness of 0. Sorry, we don't have any frame and we don't have any drawers on this one. So let's do it with a door. Set the panel thickness to 0. I'm just going to open the Ruby console this time, since we know something's going to happen. CLS, and I'm going to redraw this cabinet and use the defaults. No. And here again, we would have gotten a lot of clues even before looking at the Ruby console, because we could see that the face frame, the carcass, the end panel is all done, and it looks to be drawing a door here because that's the next thing in order. And if I look up here, draw frame and panel, construct inset doors, draw frame and panel, add style, add face. So we would go to the door tab and we find our problem. But let me undo first. Gotta do a whole bunch of undos before we get back there. I'm gonna refresh settings. Now the very last one I'm going to show you can be a little bit harder, and that is, let's say a parameter is missing. A missing parameter, let's see what happens when I open the Ruby console. Obviously, you don't always know ahead of time. You can always leave your Ruby console open if you want, if you're having lots of problems. But let me redraw this. And no. So sometimes you will get, you won't always see it drawing here in this case of a missing parameter, but in this case we got it, and we were drawing base sides and we didn't get anything drawn here. Before we had something drawn and it was going on to another operation like the pockets or maybe drilling holes or something like that, but here we got nothing at all. So you can see we were constructing a box, drawing sides, creating the side, and that's when things failed. So we can go look at our carcass tab, but there's really nothing about side thickness or so on there. So we have to remember that over here under base cabinets, we have more parameters that are describing the side. And here we can see that our side partition thickness is set to 0. So you won't always get pointed in exactly the right spot, but you'll be close. And that way should give you enough clues. And then you just got to start scanning your parameters. And, you know, oftentimes you'll remember that you were in a certain area changing things. Worst case, you can always go back to your baseline parameters or the factory parameters or your default file that you started with and start from there and make your changes again if you just can't find what it is. That's the problem. So I hope this helps you understand better the way CabWriter draws cabinets and how you can use that knowledge to help debug problems that you might have when drawing cabinets. Thank you.